Okay, hello. Can you hear us on Zoom? Okay, great. So, hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our third panel today, which is on women, peace, and security. I'm very happy for being here and moderating with our speakers. I need to make some pre-panel announcements about the time limits that we have. We need to be very strict on that, maximum 15 minutes for each of our speakers, and we are going to start with our speaker who is joining us online today. And I'm going to briefly introduce our speakers and then move on to listening to them. So starting with the first speaker today, Oleksandra Matviichuk, who is the head of human rights of the human rights organization Center for Civil Liberties, which aims at protecting human rights and establishing democracy in Ukraine and the Ozyegin region. She also coordinates the work of the initiative group Euromaidan SOS. After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Matviichuk, together with other partners, created the Tribunal for Putin initiative to document international crimes under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court in all regions of Ukraine, which became the target of attacks from the Russian Federation. In 2016, she received the Democracy Defender Award for exclusive contribution to promoting democracy and human rights from missions to the OSCE. In 2017, she became the first woman to participate in the Ukrainian Emerging Leaders Program of Stanford University. In 2022, Matviichuk was awarded with the Right Livelihood Award and recognized as one of the 25th influential women in the world by the Financial Times. The same year, the Center for Civil Liberties, headed by Matviichuk, received the Nobel Peace Prize. Let me introduce our second speaker, who is Selver Sahin, who is a development researcher with more than 15 years of experience gained in Turkey, Australia, and New Zealand. Her research has been published in multiple journals, including Third World Quarterly, Democratization, International Peacekeeping, Contemporary Politics, Asian Studies Review, and the Journal of Contemporary Asia. Currently, she's leading or co-leading 3 research projects, and we are very happy to have her here. The first one is NATO at 75, Bridging Perspectives and Strengthening Bonds through Gender-Sensitive Human Security Strategies, funded by NATO's Public Diplomacy Division. The second project, Dynamics of Overseas Scholarship Programs of G20 states in the context of their foreign policy priorities, funded under TÜBİTAK 1001 Scientific and Technological Research Program of Turkey. And the third project, Emancipating Women and Girls from Vulnerabilities through a Social Reconstruction-Oriented Approach to Disaster Management, which is the recipient of Shirin Tekeli Research Incentive awarded by Sabancı University's Gender and Women's Studies Center of Excellence. And let me also introduce our third speaker, Yuliya Biletska, who is an assistant professor at the Department of International Relations at Karabuk University in Karabuk, Turkey, where she teaches a diverse range of courses. She earned her master's degree in Eurasian Studies from the Middle East Technical University and completed her PhD studies in political science, specializing in ethnopolicy and ethnic studies at the Taurida National Vernadsky University in Simferopol, Ukraine. Her recently published research has primarily focused on state and nation-building processes in Ukraine, involving extensive field research organized by a team of Turkish scholars. Presently, she is conducting research on the different aspects of the formation of the Ukrainian diaspora in Turkey, as well as the political participation of Ukrainian migrants in Turkey. Biletska's scholarly interests encompass various areas such as identity, minority rights in Ukraine and Georgia, state and nation building, and diaspora studies with a particular emphasis on the political participation of migrants. With no further ado, I'm going to leave the floor to our first speaker, Ms. Oleksandra Matviichuk. And as I said, we would like you to have a maximum of 15 minutes of a presentation, if possible. And also, we are going to have a quick Q&A with you before you, I think you have to leave. That's why we are going to have your Q&A before you leave. Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for providing me a floor. It's a huge honor for me to address to this distinguished audience, and I would like to focus on three main topics. The first topic is role of women in this war of aggression which Russia started against Ukraine. And we now in a time of a huge mobilization of Ukrainian women. Ukrainian women joined Ukraine armed forces. Ukrainian women take important political decisions. Ukrainian women coordinate civil initiatives. Ukrainian women document war crimes. Ukrainian women are in the forefront of this battle for freedom and democracy. And it's once again proved the very simple thing that bravery has no gender. And why I focus on this, sharing our experience, because this is a very vivid dimension which provide opportunity to tell what is the war, this war is about. Because this war has a very vivid value dimension. In democratic countries, women can perform any role they want in family and society. But in authoritarian countries, women assign to fulfill only some concrete roles in family and societies. And this is a basis for authoritarian regime, because established relationship between people and society always reflect an idea what the government itself can do towards their own citizens. Second thing which I want to share with you, it's about Ukrainian women in Ukraine armed forces. There is no general obligation for Ukrainian women to serve in Ukrainian armed forces, and that's why important to emphasize that 68,000 of Ukrainian women volunteeringly joined to Ukraine armed forces. And because this war started not in February 2022, but in February 2014, it's worth to mention that Ukrainian women joined Ukraine armed forces from the first days of the war 10 years ago. And this is still a very long, complicated way how to transfer the whole army machine to be able to equally represent men and women and provide them the effective instrument to fulfill their constitutional obligation and to fight for our country, our people, and our human dignity. In first years of the war, women faced with a lot of artificial obstacles and barriers. And that is why the initiative Invisible Battalion was launched. And the women military groups tried to advocate and promote gender equality in Ukraine armed forces. And a lot of positive change had to be done, but still there are even more beforehand. Just several days ago, I was in Ukrainian Women Congress, participated in the panel together with women who serve as a head of battalion. And she told that for all these years when she was in Ukrainian army, she never received the women army clothes from Ukrainian state. And this is the most visible thing which I can mention, because it's not just about dignity or comfort. It's about physical survival in a lot of situations, to adapt the clothes and other self-defense equipments to be able to be used by women. But we are in the right track, and together with international partners, we are going on this way to make and to ensure gender equality in Ukraine armed forces. And third point, which I want to mention, speaking on behalf of women who document war crimes, women who protect human rights, and women who decide to take arms to protect their children from Russian aggression. This is our common vision that Ukraine deserves to be a member of NATO. Ukraine shares the values of freedom and democracy and ready to defend them. Ukraine will be not just a beneficiary, but a powerful contributor to the security of alliance. And this is not promises. This is a fact proven on the battlefield. Ukraine will make NATO stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I said, since you will have to leave early, we are going to move on to having a short Q&A discussion for our first speaker. So are there any questions that we can have for our first speaker? Okay.
Thank you very much. I have a question. Were there already women taken as prisoners of war by the Russians, by the Russian side? And what happened to them?
Oh, thank you for your interest to this question, because it's a huge problem. When we speak about people detained after Russian aggression, we speak about at least two categories according to international humanitarian law. It's prisoners of the war, and among them are also women, and also it's illegally detained civilians. And unfortunately, it's not very widespread knowledge that Russia illegally detained thousands and thousands Ukrainian civilians and kept them in place of detention without any legal grounds for months, for years. And among them, there are a lot of women. We, as a human rights defenders, gathered testimonies of people who released from Russian captivity, and they told us horrible stories about torture, about sexual violence, and about killing, which is occurred in this place of detention. Russia ignored all provision of Third and Fourth Geneva Conventions, which provide guarantees for prisoners of the war and as well as for civilians. And frankly speaking, we're in despair because there are no legal instruments how to make Russia to stop such kind of behavior. I personally interviewed hundreds of people who survived Russian captivity, men and women, and they told me how they were beaten, raped, smashed into wooden boxes, their fingers were cut, their nails were torn away, their nails were drilled, they were electrically shocked through their genitalia. One woman told me how her eye was dug out with a spoon. Russia also doesn't provide access of International Committee of Red Cross according their mandate to prisoners of the war as well as to illegally detained civilians. They have just sporadic temporal access to some certain people. Also, Russia ignore all international humanitarian law provisions to provide for people who, under their control, the basic human conditions like medical assistance, normal food, and all other stuff. And that is why, because we have no legal instruments for current moment, the international coalition of countries who work on returning Ukrainian civilians, prisoners of the war, and Ukrainian children to Ukraine was emerged. And just recently, they gathered in Montreal, in Canada, and made the Montreal Agreement like a plan, what steps has to be done by different countries in order to solve this problem, to return all these people, including women, back, and till this time to help these people to survive. I will finish answering the question that it's very difficult to speak about concrete numbers. Only in our database, we have 4,000 requests for help for people whose relatives, being civilians, were legally detained. And the huge proportion of these cases are cases of women.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? I have a question, since we have a few minutes to have you here at our panel. You mentioned this Congress that you participated very recently. Could you please kind of let us know a little bit more about what were the main topics and issues discussed in terms of women's, role in this war situation in Ukraine? Thank you.
It's an annual All-Ukrainian Women Congress, when women from different fields gather together and discuss the general problems for society and how women can support women. And because we're in large-scale war, a lot of topics devoted to role of women in Ukraine army and how to make their service for their country much more effective and equal to the all international standards which ensure gender equality in army. And generally, the main idea of this Congress is that women play an essential role in all fields of society. And we, as Ukrainian women in this war, we are fighting, among other things, for our daughters, because we are fighting to have our daughters never be in situation when they have to prove to someone that they are also a human beings.
Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best with your endeavors to support women fighting for liberties and their rights and the future generations in your country. Do we have any other questions? Or yeah, sure.
First of all, thank you very much indeed, Oleksandra. Thank you very much indeed, Oleksandra, for your comprehensive analysis, clear-cut analysis of the gender issue within Ukraine, and particularly in Ukrainian armed forces. You use a very important sentence saying that bravery has no gender. Correct. So is mobilization. Could there be any space for further mobilizing women in Ukraine's independence war? The reason why I am asking this question is that I have been following events in Ukraine as closely as possible. And in recent times, there have been a flurry of analyses focusing on challenges faced by Ukraine, and particularly the Ukrainian armed forces, regarding the degree or the scope of mobilization. Could you share your views on this issue with a focus on potential further mobilization of women? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. Because you follow the situation in Ukraine, you know that it has already a huge discussion started whether or not women have to fulfill the constitutional obligation and the Ukrainian legislators has to introduce this obligatory military service, not just for men for a certain age, but also for women. So the discussion has started, and there are different arguments, and there are different positions according to this issue. I'm not a military person. I'm a human rights lawyer, and that's why I can share and highlight this discussion from the human dimension. Russia is preparing for a long, protracted war. Russia's only officially spent 40% of their budget for military expenses, and it's very naive to think that Russia is preparing for a long, protracted war just with Ukraine, having in mind that Russia planned to restore the former Russian Empire, and they publicly discussed on the Russian TV which next country they will attack, and people who survived from Russian captivity, they told us that Russians see their vision of the future like this, that first we will occupy Ukraine, and then together with you, we will go to conquer in other countries. And the process of forcible mobilization of Ukrainian citizens to Russian army all these years is going on in occupied territories. Beside this, Russia have 140 million people, and now we all know that Russia hosts thousands and thousands North Korean soldiers, because North Korea is starting to send not just rockets and drones, but their troops to Russia to fight on the side of Russia in this war of aggression against Ukraine. So, taking into complicity of all the situation, it's normal that this discussion are on the place because this war for our survival. And when we speak about equality in rights, it's okay to start discussion to speak about equality in obligations, but in order to make this discussion concrete, I think that we as a state have to go further with different kinds of reform within Ukrainian army, because while we have problems with mobilization of men, you can't instead solving this problem start the mobilization of women, because it will not solve the first problem, it will provide just two problems to solve. So we will see in future how Ukrainian legislators, based on the opinion of Ukrainian society, will decide this very sensitive issue.
Okay, thank you so much. So I guess we are exactly on time to finish up this first part of our panel. Thank you for your contributions, and I wish you all the best with your endeavors in the near and future in general. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's move on to our second speaker, who is Selver Sahin. 15 minutes,
I need help with
as we mentioned.
using the PowerPoint slides. A few slides that I've prepared need help. Can somebody help me? If someone can open the slides, just a few of them. Emergency here. Coming, okay. Right, well, thank you. The presentation I'm delivering today is based on a research. It's based on a project that I'm doing with the kind assistance of a PhD student at Koç University as well, Stari Kurdish. I would like to thank her for her kind assistance with the planning, with the organization, and with the management of the project we've been doing. We've been doing this year. Well, the project is entitled NATO at 75, and we're looking at the NATO's policy and practice of the WPS. As Oleksandra just mentioned, the disproportionate effects of violence and war on women and children, girls, is one dimension of the UN-led, UN-initiated WPS agenda back in 2000. A few days ago, we celebrated the 24th years anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. Together with that resolution, 9 other resolutions that have been adopted by the Council over time altogether constitute the 1325 framework, which sets the basis of the UN's WPS agenda, Women, Peace and Security agenda, which is based on 2 sets of recognitions. One, as I already mentioned, is the disproportionate effects of war and violence, interstate war or civil war on women and girls, which indeed these vulnerabilities that deepen, that intensify during the emergencies, including the disaster times, including natural disasters or man-made, human-made disasters, but also war, have their roots indeed in the so-called normal times. The inequalities, economic inequalities, social inequalities, political inequalities, material inequalities that exist in the so-called normal times just exacerbate when violence breaks out or when a natural disaster occurs, like the earthquake that we experienced last year. Women, children, or the violence, escalating violence in Gaza, where 70% of the displaced people and the people who were killed by the Israeli military during its operations, actually women, girls and children, boys and girls and women constituted the majority of the victims in Gaza, in Ukraine, in the Tigray region, like all other conflict-affected zones across the world. So one recognition, women and children are more vulnerable. They are disproportionately affected by the disruption of the so-called normal life emergencies, including war. The second recognition is important because it points out that we should not just see the women and girls as the mere victims of violence. We need to recognize their contributions, their skills, their knowledge, because women take different roles. They may take up combat roles, as Oleksandra just mentioned. They also assume different other roles as mothers, as daughters, as someone who takes care of the family when the male members of the family, the household, have joined the armed forces to save their country or to invade another country, or when a civil war breaks out. So 2 important sets of recognition constitute the basis of the UN's WPS agenda. And the project that we are doing is based on a seminar series. We were very lucky, we were very fortunate to have our current permanent representative at NATO in Brussels, Mr. Gümrükçü, and our WPS public diplomacy representative in Brussels as well. Kübra Hanım, and also from NATO College to the journalist. And of course, Ambassador Ildem, we were also lucky to have him. We learned a lot from his experience as the Deputy Secretary of the Deputy Secretary of NATO. So we have learned a lot. We have covered different aspects of the NATO's WPS agenda together with the integration of gender equality and human peace and security into the core tasks of NATO. And the question, this whole project began with a simple but very powerful question that Cynthia Annoy asked, one of the feminist scholars. Where is woman in international relations? Where is woman in international politics? Which points to the male-dominated nature of international relations, construction of the norms, construction of the roles, construction of the knowledge about how the world works is all dependent on these distinctions, gender-based distinctions. So this is a book that has been published, released this year on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the foundation of NATO. A Rutledge book. And at Bilkent, we were fortunate to have the editor of the book together with Ambassador Ceylan Esra and also Ambassador Drew. As they might remember, I also raised my hand and wanted to make the point that where is woman? Where is woman in NATO? Because I couldn't see a single chapter on NATO, on gender, inclusion of gender or implementation of gender equality at NATO. And it's my hope that next edition will have just one, maybe more than one or two chapters on gender, which is important. Indeed, it intersects everything, all political inequalities, gender-based inequalities, gender-based ideas, indeed, intersect other inequalities, class-based inequalities, political inequalities we all face to different varying degrees. And indeed, the question, where is NATO? Where is woman? Where are the women in NATO? Indeed, women have been there from the beginning. And I would like to share this photo of a Turkish colonel. She was the first female jet pilot of NATO. Turkey's first jet pilot, but also NATO's first fighter jet pilot, and she sets a great example. We should recognize it. We should celebrate it. We should celebrate women's contribution, Turkish women's contribution to NATO as well. And this is the timeline of the developments in the field of gender equality or the development of the WPS agenda at NATO. I'll be happy to share the slides if you're interested. I don't want to read them, just wanted to bring them to your attention. But there was a progress. This is a historical process. And we see the adoption of different gender plans, policy plans, action plans, and they have been revised over the past 10 years, 10 to 15 years. So this shows NATO's interest in integrating the UN's WPS agenda into its policy and operations in the field, in missions in the field. And when we look at this, the practice side, in addition to the policy side, what we see is that we see progress towards a greater gender balance within NATO. 44% of the international staff members is female. And at the decision-making level also we see a greater participation of women, but we don't have a Secretary General, no female Secretary General yet on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of NATO. Well, of course, the election of Secretary General is a political process. It's based on a political compromise between the political leaders of NATO members. So there is a political side of it, but it is our hope that one day we will see a female Secretary General to complement these positive developments in gender equality. And around 13% of the NATO armed forces is made up of female troops, and this is a but the integration of the WPS into defense and deterrence compared to crisis management and cooperative security has been slow, has been challenging, because we're talking about an institution, a security sector. We're talking about an institution, an organization that is engaged in international security that has been dominated by men. So this will take time. It's a process, and it's a progressive process. We will get there at some point, based on the developments we have experienced over the past 20 years. I think I've 4 or 5 minutes, okay. One of the practical dimensions of the application in terms of the implementation of the UN's WPS agenda in the context of NATO is the creation of certain posts like military gender advisors in the armed forces of the member states, and also the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council members as well. So this is again a positive development, an example of positive development, including Turkey. Over 30 countries and 30 members of the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council have the gender advisor roles within their national armies. Militaries. And we also see the creation of the special representative of the Secretary General for Women, Peace and Security over the, again, another positive development, even though they are suffering some budgetary problems. The allocation of resources from the budget is limited, is one of the challenging aspects of the implementation of the, or more effective implementation of the WPS agenda. Well, NATO provides accredited gender advisor training to troops, to soldiers coming from member states. While NATO has adopted specific policy papers, action plans on the implementation of the WPS, we see little integration of these frameworks into the national security policies of the member states. Like this applies to Turkey and other member countries as well. And another source of criticism leveled against NATO was that when NATO introduced the implementation of its WPS agenda back in 2007, the objective of this policy was articulated this way: to improve the effectiveness of NATO-led operations, which triggered criticisms from feminist organizations by saying that, well, the objective should be responding to the gender-specific needs of different gender groups facing war or violence. You're talking about your own operational effectiveness, so this indeed indicates, from their perspective, a contradiction, a misfit. And NATO has also been criticized for using or for owning the WPS agenda as a military organization, embracing the peace-building approach has been again criticized by feminist organizations, saying that, well, militaries were male-dominated identities, practices, behaviors, or what feminists call as hegemonic masculinity is represented. How come NATO can be a champion of the WPS agenda, which is based on gender equality and women's empowerment? So it was one of the criticisms. Again, another criticism that has been again leveled against NATO was about the increased military spending by NATO member countries. According to the latest figures by SIPRI, in 2002, last year, record amount of money was spent by the national governments. Well, Russia, China. We also see other countries that are members of the NATO governments. So NATO has been criticized from that perspective as well. Increased spendings, more and more resources being allocated for purchasing weapons on the one hand, and how come this can be reconciled with the UN's global women, peace and security agenda. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Right on time. And let's move on to our third and final speaker. Yuliya Biletska, Professor Biletska, could we?
Okay. So, Yok indirmek gerek yok. Evet. Okay. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. When I was discussing with Megan the audience that will be present here in this event, she told me that mostly it will be students. So I tried to create some kind of interactive presentation, so the audience in the end of the day could also participate and take part in the presentation. That's why when you see, I mean, you have to see QR code, just a second. Şuradaki. Sesi kapatsan olur. So you can also join with QR code, or just go to ahaslides.com and write this code. So there are some questions that you can vote for, and we will see, I mean, whether you were right or not. So kind of quiz, yeah, because again, I'm coming from the teacher's background. That's why when I hear something about students, I automatically try to educate and try to make it as interactive as possible. So as you see, I will be talking today about the challenges that feminism has in Ukraine since war started. Started in 2014 and the full-scale invasion of Russia in 2022. Before we start, I would like you to imagine the situation. You need a shoes, yeah? A pair of shoes, but you don't know which pair of shoes you would like to choose. So you ask your friends, I don't know, your mother, your sister, your brother, and a few your friends to help to choose the shoes for you. So that very suitable. And you go to for the shopping mall, and while you was walking to the shopping mall, a crazy guy on Sahin, or whatever, BMW, hit you. And your leg is broken in that moment. So, my question is, how do you think your relatives, friends, would behave in this situation? Would they continue the shopping and try to find a nice pair of shoes for you? Or they would try to take you to the hospital? Yeah, so this is my question. Because the feminism in Ukraine now, currently, is very much criticized by the World Feminist Organization and World Feminist Movement that it's not original, feminism, it's not true feminism, it's not that. And by the way, the Women, Peace, Security agenda is also criticized. The way of implementation of this agenda in Ukraine, it's heavily criticized by the feminist movement around the world, not in Ukraine. Yeah, mostly. So why I do this analogy with shoes? So the women and feminist movement in Ukraine, they were your relatives who, when you got injured, they took you to the hospital, but not continue the original way and the original purpose of your visiting the mall. Yeah? So when someone criticizes feminist movement in Ukraine, that's saying that they started to be very militarized, that it's not according to the feminist views, because again, war is a patriarchal, the result of patriarchal society, etc. So they have to follow the strict agenda of feminist movement. They continue to fight for the social and economic rights. I always say that in that case, they would be your relatives that go to shop and find a nice shoes for you instead of taking you to your hospital. Because maybe next day or in a month, if your leg will be not cured, it will be some gangrene, some sepsis, and you will lose your leg. And if you lose your leg, there is no need for the shoes at all. So the same stuff happens in Ukraine. Our feminists in Ukraine, they know very well if Ukraine loses this war against a highly patriarchal, authoritarian society of Russia, there will be no place for any feminist idea in that society at all. So no shoes would be possible to choose because there is no leg, there is no state, there is no democracy. I would like to remind you that this war is war of values, is war for democracy, is war for freedom, first of all, yeah? It's ideological war in this sense. It's not a war for territories. I mean, of course, territories and human are involved, but again, if we look to the source of this war, it's ideological war of two worlds. So this, I mean, generally, again, the feminism movement in the world, they criticize Ukrainian feminists that mostly, I mean, they call it a nationalist feminism, I'm sorry, that they prioritize the defense and the security of the states over the broader or great feminist goals, the right feminist goals, I would say. Because even if we look to the agenda of Women, Peace and Security agenda, it was also implemented in Ukraine. When the war started in 2014, Ukraine actually became the first active zone that implement that agenda and implement national action plan, which was developed for 2016-2020 under the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. And these types of agenda, they applied in the post-conflict societies, yeah? And the second plan was introduced for the 2021-2025, and very, I wouldn't say funny, but very actually strange story that the ongoing meeting about this agenda happened in the 23-24 of February 2022. So they couldn't finish the second session to talk about the upcoming plans for this national action plan because of the war, obviously. So when the full-scale war started, the agenda itself also had to be updated. So it wasn't about the peacekeeping, but it was about to fight and to defend a country, to defend independence. And we see the highly militarization, and that's why most of the feminists, they criticize WPS agenda for its militarization in Ukraine. They say, okay, you care more about the combats, the women in combat, than about the social rights, than about peacekeeping. I mean, peacekeeping is possible only when your leg got out of the plaster and cured, not when it's broken and you're sitting in the middle of Beyoğlu and crying because of pain. So this need of strong defense, actually, it redefines the WPS agenda and mostly focusing on the female representation in military roles rather than the general social reform, whatever. Yeah? And they also criticize, I mean, there is some criticism about the NATO response to the conflict in the framework of this agenda, and saying that, I mean, NATO just from time to time uses this as the instrument to support some strategic narratives in conflicts, like in Afghanistan, for example, and in Ukraine there is already some strong Western support. So I mean, there's no necessity, and they don't pay much attention to that, and vice versa, they pay much attention to the number of women in the military. So they pay attention to the recruiting women in the military, which is technically is opposed to the classical feminist ideas of being of being out of a patriarchal society and to restructure this patriarchal society, and war as a result of patriarchal society. So you can join right now. My first question will be, I don't know how to start. Okay, I see. I don't know how many people joined, but we will see. So what is the average percentage of women serving in the armed forces of NATO? It was in the previous presentation, so let's see who was watching. Yeah, exactly. So this is the average, and Megan, oh, you're the first, good, so you were listening. If we look to the years between 1999 and 2014, so it's started from 7% and go up to the 10%, and then this is from the report of 2022, so it's the data of 2021, it's 12.5%. And let's look to the general, and you see Ukraine here. Yeah, it's the gray one, the third gray one from the left. Yeah, so it has one of the highest number of female military among all members. I will not point out the Turkey. Yeah, you could find it yourself somewhere in the end. Yeah, it's the last one. I'm very sorry. Yeah, you know about this problem. So in 2021, it's 17, almost 18% of military were actually women. So it's 17.8%. And let's have another question. So what is the number of, again, who were, Oleksandra mentioned it, but Oleksandra mentioned the general stuff, civil and military, both of them. I mean, try guess. This is just both. No, it's just military, sorry. Yes, the military, the correct answer is 45,000. So currently, the military staff is 45,000. Also, Henrik became the first. If we look to the numbers, in 2024, Oleksandra mentioned about this, it's like August or September data, it's 68,000. Compared to the 2014 10 years, it's 49. But what is the biggest difference is the number of military, not civil and military together in the army, but just military. Because in 2014, it was just 16,000. And in 2024, it's 45,000. Currently, it makes up 15%. Why it's 2 years and so big changes from 17 to 15? Because during this war, the military personnel definitely doubled. Ukraine doubled it. That's why, in the proportion, it was some decrease, but in general, definitely we have number increased. We have 13,000 the women who have combat status, and over 4,000 females who defend Ukraine in the combat zone. And women in Ukraine, from being as the subject or from being the object of conflict, as generally presented in the WPS agenda, it became a subject, yeah? And in this sense, agenda works. They are not just passive victims. Of course, there are women victims and female victims. We will talk about this, but mostly they definitely involved in defense. They voluntarily supported some displaced people. And this image of mother, citizen mother that was assigned in patriarchal society to women and a citizen soldier that assigns to men actually now is not that clear, and we changed this in this perspective and this perception in Ukrainian society just for 2 years, let's say. And okay, another question. Join. Okay, how do you think? What was the woman profession before 2022? No, she was a journalist. And do you think she decided to be a military because she is like feels herself as a real officer and it was a dream of her life? No, it wasn't a dream of her life, but he became a very professional and very good soldier that hit with this arm a lot of Russian drones and not just drones. Okay, Megan is still the first, good. The last question. What was this woman profession before the full-scale invasion? It's easy right now. You can guess. Yeah. Yeah, she's a poet. She's a very famous poet. And the last time I was in the literature days, it was in Odessa, she joined this literature day online from the battlefield, actually. From somewhere, she hides somewhere and joined and read the poems to the audience from the battlefield. Yeah, I mean, so she was also not thinking of being military just because, I mean, it's her profession and she likes it, yeah? But because she needs to defend her country, because she needs to defend the values that she believes in, because without this, if we lose, there is no possible future for Ukrainians in Ukraine under the occupation. And we saw this in many, many cities that was occupied and then deoccupied. Okay, great. And we have women in army command that became a general. Of course, there is not the very high numbers, but still, it's a real big changes. Over, okay. In the daily speeches, even the President Zelensky always mentioned the gratitude to both to men defenders and female defenders. And we have women in diplomacy. Currently, it's 22% of diplomatic missions led by women. We have women in protection of human rights. The first our speaker, she won the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize, because of that. And we have also women, a very strong movement of women who do the who fight for liberation of prisoners and search for missing persons. Mostly it's wives and mothers of the prisoners of war. We have huge women involvement in humanitarian involvement. Due to the war conditions, women became heads of household. And of course, I mean, it's a positive side, but there is still some problems. Yes, still, because of war, we have sexual violence, human trafficking, psychological traumas, educational crisis, marginalization of minority females, LGBTs, increased poverty, unemployment, political marginalization. But again, all these women are fight against this because these caused by patriarchal Russian society. And the last I promised, and of course one of the huge topic that is under this umbrella is war crimes, and particularly the crime that Russia steal and deport Ukrainian children and abduct Ukrainian children and bring them to Russia. It changes its name, it changes its identity, and it actually aims to, it can be considered as an act of genocide. And because of that, you know that Putin and Lvova-Belova, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants because of that. So all these were done to destroy children's identity, Ukrainian identity, to eliminate Ukrainian identity, and to make them fight in the future against Ukraine. So I hope we win this war, and feminists will be happy to build the real feminism instead of being just military personnel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I don't want to spend any time other than opening the floor to questions and receiving questions from you. Please.
Thank you very much to all speakers for very illuminating and pertinent presentations. I don't have a question, but I have two pertinent remarks, especially with regard to Professor Sahin's point on Turkish performance as well, if I may. And NATO performance. There was Deputy Secretary General in NATO, a lady, but when I was Assistant Secretary General, there was another Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy, my good friend, Kolinda Gabar-Katarovic. She was for Public Diplomacy, Assistant Secretary. She later became again the President of Croatia. Just to add that so that it is not missed. The second point is an anecdote from me, very short one. the Baltic states did not have air forces for air policing initially. So the air policing was done every 3 months. 3 countries, NATO countries, 3 planes from each did the air policing for them. And I was head of a delegation as Assistant Secretary to Latvia. And the Latvian Prime President gave us a dinner, and there he mentioned that at that time Turkey was one of those 3 countries that was providing 3 planes, and he said to me that our skies are being protected by a Turkish lady, because one of the pilots was a lady, and I felt proud, just to add that. And about the diplomatic service, again, in our diplomatic service, lady ambassadors, now there are many, but the first one was my boss in Council of Europe in Strasbourg. Just to add these anecdotes and examples. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. One day we will have a Secretary General.
Okay. We have another question.
Yeah. Hi again. I have 2 questions, actually, one to you, one to you. My question to you is, as someone who completed United Nations military gender advisory course, what I realized is there were so many extreme details that is not practical and realistic to apply to the field. And one of the, also I attended lessons learned from Afghanistan. It's one of the Istanbul Policy Center of Excellence in Italy. And they are the people of this field, they clearly said that these conditions cannot be bearable for females. And the reality and UN resolutions, to me it sounds a bit like maybe we should start criticizing the UN resolutions being extremely idealistic and not so close to the field. Maybe we should include many people from the field. I mean, do you think this is the reason most of the nations and NATO looks like they are failing to follow UN resolution when it comes to peace and security agenda? And my question to you is, I think as a female, it has always been flattering for me to see female contribution to the peace and security and defense, obviously. And I'm also a lawyer, so given the Geneva Convention, I've seen like many things, human trafficking and sexual assault, etc. These are the things that many people of conflict zones, especially in Africa, have been going through for a certain period of time. And it gave a positive impact when it comes to Ukrainian example, because right now you have many female women fighting against those. So what kind of tools or what kind of strategies would you advise to these African countries to increase female contribution? Because again, it's not just the reality of Ukraine, but sadly all conflict zones. Thank you.
Okay, so we have just a few minutes left. Is there any other question? Let's collect the last question from you and then move on to the answers. Okay?
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Sylvia, Master Student in International Relations. So I have questions for Professor Selver and also for Professor Yuliya. First one, I'm going to ask, you mentioned, Professor Selver, you mentioned about hegemonic masculinity, which is really an interesting topic. I also took class about gender last semester about this. And I also searched about percentage of women in NATO, in national forces, 12%, and also Ambassador mentioned about that before, about the women in NATO's. And also European Parliament surpassed 40% women in the parliament. My question is, will it increase in the future, especially for Turkish women as a representative for this, alliances and parliaments and unions and everything? And for Professor Yuliya, as I know that there are a few sanctions package applied to Russia since the invasion of Ukraine 2022, do you think it's effective in general and also particularly for women? Because this is a really interesting topic. I don't really know about this, but you are an expert, so I'm so curious about that. And also, out of curiosity, this is about the woman army stereotype that most of the women are fighting behind the lines, not in the front line. I'm just curious, is it really happen? Because lots of people talk about that. And I also want to mention about BRICS, like BRICS country.
We have very little time. If you could, just
all right.
wrap up.
There are BRICS country summit recently, and they introduced the new currencies of BRICS. Then I checked that one BRICS chain currency now it's $77 US dollars. Do you think it will affect to, like this war in economic or political aspects or military aspect? Thank you so much.
Thank you, and apologies for the time pressure, but yeah, we have one more panel. That's why I'm just giving the floor to the answers here. Thank you. Yeah,
thank you for
please.
raising the point, the policy practice gap that we describe the situation, not just in the implementation of the WPS agenda, but in security sector reform as well, like the creation of effectively and democratically functioning police service and militaries in conflict-affected countries has been a key pillar of the UN's, NATO's peace-building agenda. So clearly, these tasks, the way they have been described or identified as a policy objective, is idealized. The situation on the ground is completely different. So being able to adapt to the conditions, the dynamics of power relations at the domestic or national, subnational levels is important. Because we're talking about not just the technical engagement. This is a very politically sensitive, socially sensitive process of reorganizing the social power relations, gender relations in societies where patriarchal orders are in place. And hegemonic masculinity here is one of the concepts, like behaviors, types of behaviors, identities associated with men are given a higher value. So this has implications for NATO and other organizations as well. So there is, in principle, yes, it is important to recognize and integrate gender equality across all tasks of NATO, and across all stages of peace building, from peace negotiation to the signing of a peace agreement, through its implementation, women should be given a meaningful place, not just giving a seat on the peace negotiation table, but a meaningful one. A meaningful participation can only occur if women are indeed involved in the making of decisions that affect their lives. But when we look at the situation in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, circumstances are completely different, right? We're talking about not just the normative structures, but the material structures of inequalities. Many women are unemployed, economically dependent. So I have to put into practice. I have to put these principles into practice. That's a challenge. So that's a challenge, and there's no easy answer to it. Finding reliable local partners is one approach that UN has pursued, NATO has pursued. Powerful groups that have some agency, some influence at the local level, their involvement is one way to look at it. And like I said, there is no easy answer. Very idealized definition, but the reality is completely different.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to the last answers and brief.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So even though that I'm mostly focused on the positive developments and show you kind of ideal picture, the real situation is far from ideal. It's definitely. And there are a lot of improvements. But what I try to focus in my presentation at this general feminist criticism against the feminist movement, the nationalistic or patriotic and feminist movements in Ukraine is out of context. That, I mean, just the first be in this person's shoe to understand why they behave like this. In terms of Africa, and I mean, I don't know, of course, Africa is very different, and we know the example of Rwanda, which is quite went far in terms of feminist movements and in terms of involvement women into the political institutions, into the political agenda, I would say. So I don't know, I mean, who needs to educate whom. In this case, probably Rwanda could share much more experience. Of course, it was in the result of the bloody war, but same as in Ukraine. Yeah. So, I mean, yes and no, let's say. About your question, let's start from the last one. The BRICS and the so-called club of authoritarian leaders, of outsiders, let's say. I mean, it was the exhibition of power, yeah, that we still are important in this world, first, and second, would it be a result in, yes, it is, it's already, yes, so it's not Russia fighting against Ukraine. This is very important, because it's not only Russia. You know, when I'm in Odessa, Iranian drones are bombing me, not something else, but Iran. So it's Iran which is involved. It's North Korean forces who is already in Russia and fighting against, and we already know cases that they were killed, they were wounded. Yeah, so it's this whole authoritarian club is fighting against the one democratic Ukraine, and of course with the support of NATO, and we hope that this support will continue, because otherwise, without this support, this war will be lost. The war of democracy, the war for democracy, let's say, will be lost. About the front line and back, as I mentioned already, 4,000 women in active combat right now. So, I mean, if we compare to men, yes, it's less, but we have women in the whole positions. Again, the first picture, the journalist, she's in active combat. Yeah, so like, there are still a lot of problems about this, and Oleksandra mentioned about the uniform, about the perception. Yes, but I mean, it's a good start for the women to also to participate in this war of independence.
Sure. I forgot to address your question about the Turkish context. In addition to the photo I shared during my presentation, Colonel Altınçekiç, Leman Bozkurt Altınçekiç, who was the first, Turkey's first fighter jet pilot and also NATO's first jet pilot. The Turkish women indeed have actively struggled, demanded for their rights since the late 19th century. The Turkish women, indeed, they were the first to form the first political party in Turkey, even before Atatürk's CHP, after the War of Independence. So I wanted to recognize, I wanted to emphasize Turkish women's active agency and capacity in exercising their political, their social, their cultural rights. So this is a process, and as my colleague also shared from the slides, at the moment the percentage of female officers, female soldiers in the Turkish army is 0.3%, very low. But this is a process, like I said. This year, you might remember from the graduation ceremonies of the military academy, all 3 valedictorians were female officers. So I think this shows something that we should all celebrate in this country, and it will be much better in the future.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think we are finishing up with a very nice note, the panel, and I wish we had a whole day to discuss about it, but it's not possible, obviously. You will probably have some time to discuss during later, breaks and everything. So thank you very much once again, and we are going to continue with the next panel just afterwards, I guess, right? Yeah.
Maybe about 10 minutes, because we will also have an online guest joining us from NATO.
Okay, okay, great. So, yeah, thank you.